Finnian Cross nearly face planted off the edge of his own yacht dock the moment his Italian leather shoe caught on a loose coil of rope. And the only thing that stopped him from plunging into the icy Manhattan marina was a pair of hands grabbing the front of his navy cashmere coat and yanking him back with surprising strength. "Watch it," a female voice snapped, breathless and annoyed. "Are you trying to die in designer?" Finnian stumbled backward, arms flailing before finally regaining his balance. His sunglasses had slipped down the bridge of his nose, and when he looked up he saw her, the woman who just saved him. She had wild auburn curls tucked beneath a faded baseball cap, paint splattered across her jeans, and a tool belt slung over her hip. She was clearly working on one of the nearby docks, probably part of the maintenance crew. She looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days, but her eyes, sharp and stormy gray, locked with his like she'd just challenged him to a duel. And for some reason, his heart skipped. He adjusted his coat. "You always grab rich strangers like that?" She rolled her eyes. "Only the ones dumb enough to walk straight off a dock." He laughed, actually laughed, and it startled him. Finnian Cross didn't laugh with strangers, especially not after a hellish week of boardroom battles and a $7 billion tech acquisition that made national headlines. Billionaire by 35, and yet here he was, saved from a watery death by a sarcastic woman in ripped jeans. "You okay?" she asked, brushing her hands off on her pants before glancing back at the dock she'd been fixing. "I think you just saved my life." "I think I saved your dry cleaning bill," he exhaled, still stunned. "I'm Finnian, by the way." She hesitated, then offered a small nod. Arielle Raines." He reached out his hand instinctively. She looked at it like she wasn't sure whether to shake it or slap it, but finally gave it a quick shake. "Nice grip," he said. "Nice coat," she shot back. "Bet it costs more than my monthly rent." He was used to women giggling, leaning in, pretending not to know who he was. Arielle didn't even flinch. Either she truly had no clue who he was or she just didn't care. He didn't know which was more intriguing. "You work around here?" he asked, nodding toward the dock. "Sometimes. I take on marina maintenance gigs when I'm not restoring furniture or trying to survive New York." "Restoring furniture?" "Yeah, old stuff, broken stuff, giving it a second life," he smiled. "That sounds kind of beautiful." She gave him a flat look. "It's mostly sawdust and back pain, but sure." Finnian had meetings, a driver waiting, a quarterly earnings call in 2 hours, but he didn't move. Something about her dry humor, her honest eyes, the way she didn't care who he was, he couldn't walk away. "Let me thank you," he said. "For saving me." "You don't have to, I insist. Come to dinner, my treat," she blinked. "I just pulled you off a dock. That doesn't mean you owe me lobster." "Good, because I was thinking champagne and truffle risotto." Arielle opened her mouth, probably to say something sarcastic, but paused. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about risotto." She stared at him for a beat, like she was trying to figure him out. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, but I'm wearing jeans." "And you're not allowed to fall into anything." "Deal." Dinner was at a rooftop restaurant in Midtown, the kind with no prices on the menu and a private elevator guarded by a man in a tux. Arielle arrived in dark jeans, a black top and boots that had definitely seen better days, but somehow, Finnian couldn't take his eyes off her. She walked in like she didn't care what anyone thought, and that confidence was more striking than any diamond necklace in the room. "You really weren't kidding," she said, eyeing the skyline view as he pulled out her chair. "Told you." He ordered for both of them lobster ravioli, champagne, and yes, truffle risotto. Arielle's eyebrows shot up when the waiter poured the wine from a bottle that looked older than both of them combined. "So what is it you actually do, Finnian?" she asked, twirling her fork. "I build tech companies, invest in startups, occasionally fall off docks," she laughed. "So you're one of those billionaires who never sleeps," he tilted his head. "You Googled me." "Nope, but I heard the hostess whisper your last name like she was about to faint," he chuckled. "I don't usually talk about work on first dates. This is a date," he leaned back in his chair. "You wore lipstick." She rolled her eyes, but her lips curled into a smile, As the wine flowed and the city glowed around them, something shifted. They talked about everything: music, childhood, how she used to build tree houses with her dad, and how he hadn't taken a real day off in 5 years. She told him about her dream to open a vintage restoration studio. He told her about his dream to vanish from the world for a week and just be a person again. By dessert, she was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes, and Finnian couldn't stop watching her. It had been years since he felt this lightness, this pull, this ridiculous urge to reach across the table and touch her hand just to make sure she was real. "You're nothing like I expected," she said softly, staring at him. "Neither are you." Outside, his driver was waiting beside a sleek black Bentley. When he opened the door for her, she hesitated. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "The cars, the dinners, guys like you, guys like me, rich, polished. Probably engaged to a model somewhere in Paris." He stepped closer. "I'm not engaged, and I'm standing here with you." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Why?" He didn't hesitate. "Because the second you pulled me back onto that dock, I couldn't stop thinking about you." Arielle blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know what this is yet," he said, his voice rough, "but I know I don't want it to end tonight." She bit her lip, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she whispered. He opened the door. She slid in. And as he rounded the car to climb in beside her, Finnian Cross knew one thing for sure: he'd nearly fallen off a dock that morning, but by the end of the night, he'd already started falling for her. Arielle adjusted the weight of the toolbox on her shoulder as she stepped into the elevator of the pre-war building in Nelita. The smell of old varnish and plaster hung in the air, and the 4th floor button stuck when she pressed it. She didn't mind. Patience came with the job. She had 3 clients to get to today and a cracked walnut dresser waiting in her studio, but all she could think about was the way Finnian's laugh had sounded across that rooftop last night. Warm, unfiltered, like it hadn't been used in a while. She shook the thought off as the elevator creaked to a halt. Work first. Always. By the time she finished patching the cracked ceiling beam and reattaching the vintage light fixture in Mrs. Dengilo's apartment, it was late afternoon. Her phone buzzed in her back pocket just as she was wiping her hands on a rag. She didn't recognize the number, but curiosity got the better of her. "Raines," she answered. "You're not allergic to caviar, are you?" She blinked. "Finnian, just checking." "I'm planning dinner." Arielle leaned against the doorframe, raising an eyebrow even though he couldn't see her. "You planning to feed me caviar on the back of a yacht while a string quartet plays? Don't tempt me." "Although now that you've said it, it's hard to unthink." "Finnian, meet me downtown, 7 o'clock. I promise no orchestras. I've got work. Even workaholics need to eat." She hesitated, glancing at the smudge of paint still on her arm. "Fine. But if you show up in a tux, I'm leaving. I'll wear denim, just for you." He hung up before she could argue. By 7, she found herself walking through a quiet cobblestone alley in Tribeca, where a discreet black awning with no name hung above a narrow door. Inside, it was dim and intimate: low lighting, dark wood, and soft jazz playing from a corner speaker. It wasn't flashy. It was deliberate and strangely personal. Finnian stood near the back, already out of his coat, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He wasn't wearing denim, but he also wasn't in a suit. A charcoal shirt, collar open, simple, unassuming. She didn't expect that. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. "You're lucky I didn't bring my hammer. I still might deserve it." She took her seat, scanning the room. "This place doesn't feel like you." "Because it's not for show," he said, pouring her a glass of red wine. "It's where I come when I want to disappear." She tilted her head. "Do you disappear often?" "Not enough." The food arrived: braised short ribs and saffron polenta, no caviar, no fanfare. Just quiet, intentional details, like him. "So what does someone like you actually want?" she asked, cutting into her dinner. "I mean, you've got everything, right? Power, money, your own restaurant apparently." "I didn't say it was mine." "You didn't have to." He leaned back in his chair. "I want silence sometimes. I want to build something that doesn't implode in 5 years. I want to talk to someone without wondering if they're calculating my net worth." She looked him in the eye. You think I'm calculating? No. That's why I called. She paused, letting that settle between them. He reached for his glass, gaze steady. What about you? What about me? What do you want? Not need. Want. Arielle stared at her plate, then looked up. A place that's mine. 4 walls, no leaks, no landlords who vanish for weeks. A studio with windows that don't rattle when it rains. Enough work to keep the lights on and enough quiet to hear myself think. Finnian nodded once. That's not unreasonable. It is when you're 31 and still rationing groceries. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded square of paper. Without a word, he slid it across the table. What's this? She asked, eyeing it. Just read. She unfolded it. It was a printout, a listing, a small warehouse space in Red Hook, exposed brick, high ceilings and massive windows, affordable by New York standards but still well out of her range. Why are you showing me this? Because I bought it this morning. She blinked. You what? It's yours if you want it. She froze, paper still in hand. I don't need a handout. It's not. It's a studio. You'd pay rent, a fair rate. It's an investment in me. He met her eyes. Yes. Arielle stood abruptly, shoving her chair back. You don't even know me. I know you're driven. I know you get paint in your hair and don't notice. I know you see value in things most people throw away. That doesn't mean you get to buy my life. I'm not buying anything. I'm offering a chance, her fists clenched by her side. You live in a world where you can just fix things with money. That's not how I work. His voice dropped, calm but firm. I'm not trying to fix you. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Arielle placed the paper gently back on the table. I need to think. Take your time. She turned and walked out without another word. Outside, the air had cooled. She shoved her hands in her jacket pockets, heart pounding. It wasn't the warehouse, it wasn't the offer, it was what it meant, that he saw her, that he was trying. And that terrified her more than anything. She wasn't used to men like him staying. Not after seeing her flaws. The warehouse was real. The offer was real. But the question was he back inside? Finnian remained seated, staring at the paper she'd left behind. He didn't chase her, not yet. The sun was barely above the skyline when Finnian stepped into his office on the top floor of the Cross Tech building, the floor-to-ceiling windows catching the first gold light of morning. He didn't usually come in this early, but sleep hadn't come easy. Not after the way Arielle had looked at him before walking out of the restaurant, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, her pride clashing hard against the offer he never meant as charity. He loosened his watch and dropped it on the mahogany desk, ignoring the blinking light on his phone. His assistant, Clarissa, peered in from the doorway. Board meetings in an hour. Want me to move it? No, let it stand. She hesitated. You sure? He nodded once and she vanished. Finnian paced, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't the rejection that unsettled him, it was the silence that followed. Arielle hadn't called, hadn't shown up at the dock, hadn't sent word through any channel, and he'd checked all of them. He wasn't used to not knowing, not when it came to business and certainly not when it came to women. But then again, Arielle wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. He stepped out onto the balcony, the wind colder than expected, slicing through his shirt sleeves. The city moved beneath him, unaware. He was used to being the one people chased, the one who dictated terms. But now, he'd give away every last share in his portfolio just to see her walk through his door with that cautious fire in her eyes. Down on the street, unnoticed in the swirl of taxis and steam vents, Arielle stood across from the building, arms crossed over her chest. She didn't know why she'd come. Maybe she wanted to prove something. Maybe she just needed to see the kind of world that shaped him, this glass and steel fortress, towering above everything like nothing could touch it. Nothing except her, apparently. The doorman noticed her but didn't question her presence. She wasn't dressed for this world, paint still under her nails, boots with worn laces, but she didn't care. She wasn't here to blend in, she wasn't even sure if she was here to forgive him. But something pulled her forward anyway. By the time she reached the top floor, Clarissa had already given her the once-over and buzzed her through with quiet curiosity. The elevator opened directly into Finion's office, and he was still standing by the balcony doors, back to her. She cleared her throat. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you were avoiding me." He turned, and something unreadable passed over his face before he masked it. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't come to say thank you," she said, stepping closer, "and I didn't come to say no either." He didn't move. "I wasn't trying to offend you, I know. I saw something in you, something worth building. That's what I do, Arielle. I see potential and I help it grow. People aren't companies, Finnian." "I didn't think you were." Her jaw tightened. Then why did it feel like a transaction? He crossed the room until there was barely a breath between them. "Because I don't know how to do this any other way," she blinked. "What is this?" "I don't know yet." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out something unexpected, a photograph. Worn edges, corners curled, he handed it to her without a word. Arielle looked at it and froze. It was a picture of a small two-story house, white siding, slanted porch, a rusted swing set in the yard. "My family's first home," he said quietly. "Before the company, before everything. My mom kept it spotless even when the roof leaked. My dad built that swing set with his bare hands. I haven't been back in almost 20 years. She studied him. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I remember what it's like to want something that's yours. I remember what it's like to look around and feel like everything could disappear unless you held it together with both hands." She swallowed hard. "I didn't expect that from you. I didn't expect you to pull me off a dock." He smiled for the first time. Not the practiced kind he used at galas and boardrooms, something smaller, real. "I went to the warehouse," she said, handing the photo back. "It's perfect." "Then take it." "I will, but on my terms." "Name them." "I'm not paying rent to you. That's not. I'll take a loan, market rate." "Written contract. I choose the repairs, I choose the pace. If I fail, it's on me, not on your conscience." Finnian nodded slowly. "Deal." She turned to go, but paused. "You have all this money, access, power, but I think the thing you really want is something you can't buy." He met her gaze. "What's that?" "Someone who sees who you are before everything you became." He didn't answer. She took the elevator down and he stayed frozen in place, fingers still curled around the edges of the photo. Later that night, Arielle returned to her tiny apartment in Queens and found a thick manila envelope waiting on her door. No note, no markings, but inside was a fully drawn-up loan agreement for the Red Hook Warehouse Fair terms, signed already. And at the bottom, scrawled in ink, one line not part of any legal form: "I believe in what you're building. Let me know if you ever want help holding the hammer." She ran her thumb over the words, heart caught somewhere between fear and something dangerously close to hope. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to find out. The warehouse smelled like sawdust and the future. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, catching motes of dust in the air as Arielle moved around the open space, taping off a section of the floor where her workbenches would go. The walls were still bare, the floors scuffed concrete, but to her, it already felt alive. She'd spent the last 3 weeks transforming it, ripping out old pipework, rewiring lighting, salvaging reclaimed wood for shelving. It hadn't been easy, but every blister on her palms felt earned. She hadn't seen Finnian since the day she signed the loan agreement. At first, he gave her space exactly what she'd asked for: no calls, no unannounced visits, but she felt him in the details. The new industrial sink that arrived 2 days after she mentioned needing one, the espresso machine that showed up in an unmarked box with no card. She never said thank you. He never asked for it, but the tension between absence and presence grew louder with each passing day. On a quiet Thursday morning, with the warehouse still quiet and the air sharp with early autumn chill, a shadow passed across the open doorway. She looked up, hammer in hand. Finnian stood just inside the threshold, holding a paper bag and a cup tray. "I brought breakfast," he said, stepping carefully over a tangle of extension cords. "I figured caffeine was the only safe way to approach you before noon." She wiped her hands on the hem of her shirt. "You didn't have to. You haven't been returning my calls. I never asked you to stop by." I never asked you to save my life either. She paused, watching him set the bag on a nearby work table. Bagels? From a place in Williamsburg that has a wait list. I bribed the baker with Nick's tickets. She raised an eyebrow. You don't even like basketball. I don't like waiting. She hesitated, then took the cup he offered. You're avoiding something? I'm not here to talk about the bagels. She leaned against the edge of the table. Then what are you here for? He looked around the warehouse slowly. I wanted to see what you built. I'm not finished. I didn't say you were. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. The way people look at each other when they've been circling something too big to say out loud. He stepped closer. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. She didn't flinch. Even with your empire to run. I've been running from a lot of things longer than I'd like to admit, he exhaled. No one challenges me the way you do. No one looks me in the eye and sees through every layer. Maybe that's because no one else has seen you outside of a boardroom. I want you to see all of me, not just the man on the magazine covers, not the stockholders' version, just me. She set her coffee down. I don't need a fantasy, Finnian. I don't need penthouses and surprise gifts. I know. That's why it means more when you're here. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, flat object wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, not glossy, but printed on thick matte paper. It was the warehouse, her warehouse, but taken from a distance from across the street just as the sun was rising through the window panes. The light caught the dust in the air, painting it gold. I took it last week, he said quietly. I was going to leave it on your workbench, but I needed to hand it to you myself. She stared at the image, her throat tightening. I never cared about legacy before, he continued. I thought if I built enough, bought enough, controlled enough, I'd matter, but nothing I've ever created has made me feel like I do when I'm with you. Her breath caught. I love you, Arielle. She met his eyes and everything inside her stilled. I didn't know I could belong anywhere, she said softly. Not in this city, not with anyone. But when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to fight to exist. You don't, he said. Not with me. For a moment, the warehouse was silent except for the faint creak of wood and the hum of the world beyond its walls. Then she stepped into him, setting the photo down between them. His arms came around her, not like a possession, but like a promise. She rested her forehead against his chest and for the first time let herself be held without bracing for the fall. Later that evening, the warehouse was aglow with soft light and the low murmur of conversation. Arielle had invited the handful of people who'd helped her over the past month, contractors, fellow restorers, even her old neighbor from Queens. They laughed, drank wine from mismatched glasses, and leaned against unfinished walls like they were already home. Finnian stayed close but never hovered. He didn't interrupt when she told stories. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just stood there, a hand at the small of her back, quietly proud. At one point, someone asked, "So what's next?" Arielle looked around the room, then up at Finnian. "I think," she said, "I'm finally where I'm supposed to be," and he didn't say anything. He just reached into his coat and pulled something from the inside pocket, a small box. She froze. "Finnian, it's not what you think," he said calmly. "Open it." She did. Inside was a key, simple, brass. Slightly worn around the edges. "It's for the upstairs," he said. "It wasn't in the original listing, but I had it renovated, loft apartment, full kitchen, skylight." She stared at him. "I know that space belongs to you. But I was hoping you'd consider letting me share it." Her fingers curled around the key. "You want to live above my workshop? I want to wake up in the same building where you create beauty from broken things." She laughed, eyes shining. "You're ridiculous," hopelessly. She leaned in, kissed him softly. Yes, and just like that, the man who had nearly fallen off a dock found himself standing at the edge of something far more terrifying. Love, real, undeniable, and finally his. 2 weeks later, the sun rose over Red Hook, catching on the new sign above the warehouse door. Raines Restore. Below it, fresh paint gleamed on the brick. Inside, Arielle leaned against the doorframe of the studio, sipping her coffee. Finnian stood beside her barefoot, half asleep, shirt wrinkled from sleep. She nudged him. "You're going to be late to your investor meeting." He kissed her temple. "Tell them I resigned." She paused. "You didn't." "I did." "What are you going to do?" He gestured to the space around them. "Anything that lets me build beside you." She shook her head, smiling. "You're out of your mind. Only about you." And in that quiet, golden morning, with the scent of varnish in the air and the warmth of his hand in hers, Arielle finally understood that some falls don't break you. They catch you. Arielle's fingers flew across the grain of the old oak cabinet, sanding it by instinct more than sight. The work usually centered her, but today, her mind kept drifting to the clock on the wall and the faint sound of Finnian pacing upstairs above the studio. She could hear his footsteps as clearly as if he were in the room with her, deliberate, measured, circling the same floorboards again and again. Something was bothering him. She could feel it. He hadn't said much since the board officially accepted his resignation. He'd walked away from Cross Tech 3 days ago, and though he insisted it was what he wanted, something in his eyes had shifted like a tether had been cut, and he hadn't yet found solid ground again. She wiped her hands on a rag and climbed the stairs to the loft. Finnian was standing at the window, arms folded, staring out at the skyline like it owed him an explanation. The morning sun cut across his jaw, highlighting the shadow of stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. He looked over when she stepped in but didn't speak. "You haven't touched your tea," she said, nodding toward the untouched mug on the table. "I forgot it was there. You've been up since 5. He turned back to the window. "I'm not used to quiet." Arielle crossed to him slowly. "Do you regret it?" "No." He paused. "But I didn't realize how much of me was built into that company, even the parts I didn't like. Now that it's gone, I feel hollow in places I didn't expect. You didn't lose yourself, Finnian, you just made space." He looked at her then, eyes stormy and honest. "For what?" "For whatever comes next." He studied her face. "You believe that? I wouldn't have let you move in above my studio if I didn't." A slow breath left him. "You know, I spent years convincing myself that power was the only way to feel safe. That if I controlled enough, risked enough, I'd never fall." She stepped in, resting her palm against his chest. "And now I think falling is the only way I ever got close to anything real." Her hand didn't move. "You're not falling anymore. You're choosing." He dipped his head, his forehead resting against hers. "Then I choose this. Every day." Later that afternoon, while Arielle was rearranging a shelving unit near the front window, a woman with a tailored coat and sharp eyes stepped through the door. Her heels clicked once on the polished concrete before she stopped and looked around with the kind of critical eye that came from money and years of practiced judgment. Arielle stood slowly. "Can I help you?" The woman offered a clipped smile. "You must be the one who's been keeping Mr. Cross so busy." "Depends who's asking." "I'm Evelyn Cross, his mother." Arielle's heart paused mid-beat. She hadn't expected this. Finnian had only ever mentioned his mother in passing, distant, disapproving, deeply rooted in old money circles that didn't appreciate deviation. Evelyn's gaze swept the studio. "He sent me an invitation to your opening next week." I was surprised. Arielle crossed her arms. "You came all the way down here just to vet me." "I came because I didn't understand. I thought perhaps if I saw it I might." And Evelyn turned, eyes unreadable. "He's different. Softer, but somehow stronger. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you when he handed me that invitation." Arielle didn't speak. "I don't pretend to understand the appeal of sanding furniture in a warehouse," Evelyn continued. "But I do understand what devotion looks like, and for what it's worth, I've never seen my son more certain." Arielle's shoulders eased just enough to breathe. "Thank you for coming." Evelyn gave her a nod, neither approval nor dismissal, just acknowledgement. Then she turned and left, the door closing quietly behind her. That night, Finnian found Arielle in the studio, curled on the old velvet love seat she'd restored last summer, legs tucked beneath her and a mug of cocoa in her hands. He sat beside her, stealing a sip. "My mother came by," she said. "I know, you sent her an invitation. I wanted her to see what mattered to me." She didn't throw anything. She must like you. Arielle laughed for the first time that day. I think she's trying. She never liked any of the women I dated before, too perfect, too polished. She said it always felt like they were rehearsing a role. And me, you don't rehearse. You show up, paint under your nails and all, and take up space like you earned it, which you have. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You ever think about what comes after this? Every day. Want to know what I picture? Tell me. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. She opened it. It was a floor plan. Is this? A second building, just down the block. I bought it yesterday. Finnian for us. You keep Raines Restore, but the new building. I want to turn it into a community space. Classes, workshops, a place for artists to learn how to build something that lasts. You run it, I'll fund it. She stared at him, stunned. I don't need to be CEO anymore, he said, but I still want to build things. Just with you. Her eyes filled, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let them fall. You're serious. I've never been more. She set the floor plan aside and cupped his face with both hands. We're really doing this, aren't we? We already are. 2 weeks later, the grand opening of Raines Restore filled the street with people, local artists, friends from the marina, curious neighbors, and even a few former Cross-Tech employees who came to see what their old boss had become. There was laughter spilling out of the studio, music echoing through the alley, and tables loaded with pastries and wine. Arielle stood beside Finnian in a deep green dress, her curls pinned up messily, her hands paint-free for once. A microphone was pressed into her hand, and she looked out over the crowd that had come not just for the art, but for the story. This place, she began, voice clear and steady, was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be honest. It was meant to hold every flawed, beautiful, stubborn piece of who I am. And I never thought I'd get to share it with someone who saw every crack and still wanted to stay. She turned to Finnian, who was watching her like she was the only person in the world, but I found someone who does. And because of him, and because of all of you, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm home. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Finnian stepped forward, lifting her hand to his lips. She leaned in, kissed him, and the applause turned into a roar. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the lights had dimmed, they lay together on the floor of the new building still under construction, the scent of fresh plaster and possibility in the air. Arielle traced a line along his chest. You happy? He turned toward her, brushing hair from her face. I'm in love, I'm home, and I've never felt more alive, she smiled, eyes soft. Then let's build everything else from here, and they did, together, always.